The radio crackled to life after days of silence. That's when I knew something was very wrong. Part 1. The Arrival. The first scream wasn't supposed to happen that early. I'd only been at the tower for 3 nights when it reached me, curling through the pines like smoke. It wasn't the scream of an animal either. I'd grown up in Montana. I knew the yips of coyotes, the warning calls of elk, even the shrill, dying cries of rabbits when a hawk took them. This was different. Human. Male by the edge of its break. And worse, there was no echo. The sound was swallowed by the forest as if the trees themselves had closed ranks around it. I froze by the cabin window, flashlight trembling in my grip, staring into the black seam between the ridges. For a heartbeat, I thought about calling it in, reporting disturbance, possible hiker in distress. But my hand wouldn't move to the radio. Deep down, even then, I knew something wasn't right. It didn't sound like someone in need of help. It sounded like someone already gone. That's how my season as a fire lookout began in the Rockies, summer of 1980. If you've ever thought about what silence feels like when it has weight, when it presses on your ribs, whispers in your ear, and steals your reason, you'll understand what those mountains can do. They aren't just beautiful. They don't just stretch their jagged teeth toward the sky in triumph. No, the Rockies guard things you don't put on maps, things you don't talk about around campfires. And I was about to learn what it means when the forest hides something that doesn't want to be found. Before I tell you the rest, before I drag you up into that wooden tower with me, to hear the static, to see the reflection moving where it shouldn't, I need you to do one thing. If you want to hear more stories like this, the kind that keep you awake at night staring at your ceiling fan, hit subscribe. It keeps this channel alive and gives me the drive to bring you more tales that don't let go once they've sunk their teeth in. Now, let me take you back. I arrived at the ranger station outside Rocky Mountain National Park with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder and a head full of expectations I didn't yet know would betray me. The station smelled like coffee, burned too long on the pot, and wet pine carried in by the breeze. George was already waiting. He looked every bit the part. Grizzled beard, wide shoulders beneath a faded ranger jacket, eyes that had seen more wilderness than I could imagine. "You Daniel Carter?" he asked, voice dry as the gravel under our boots. I nodded, adjusting my bag. "That's me, reporting for Tower 1. He studied me the way hunters study tracks, silently measuring how long I'd last out there. "You ever spend more than a week alone?" I smirked, trying to hide my nerves. "I lived in Denver. That's enough isolation." He didn't smile. "City loneliness doesn't count. The trees out here don't care if you feel sorry for yourself. They don't echo back your voice, they take it." He tossed me the keys to a battered Ford pickup. "Follow me, I'll show you the tower. After that, you're on your own." The drive took us deep into the mountains, past ridge lines jagged like broken glass, through valleys stitched with rivers that sparkled in the dying light. The air grew thinner, sharper, until each breath stung like it had weight. I wanted to soak it in, wanted to feel the sense of freedom I thought I'd signed up for. But the silence pressed harder with every mile we climbed. Finally, the trees parted to reveal Tower 1, a tall, rickety skeleton of wood and iron perched on a hill above a sea of black pines. Paint peeled from its frame. The ladder stretched upward like a dare. "Home!" George said flatly. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and old smoke. A cot leaned against the far wall, sheets folded military tight. A shelf of tattered books slumped in the corner. London, Hemingway, a few mystery paperbacks with waterlogged covers. A radio sat on the desk, square and stubborn, like it had never once failed. "This is your lifeline," George said, patting the radio. "Call in smoke, call in storms. Call in if you get scared enough to think you're not alone. But never, ever let it go quiet. The silence will eat you alive faster than fire." He walked me through the routine. 2 scans a day from the platform, keep notes on weather, log all activity, even if it's just squirrels chewing bark. "Best advice I can give you," he added, eyes narrowing. "Vigilance isn't about fires. It's about keeping your head when the forest starts talking back." I laughed nervously, waiting for the joke. He didn't laugh. That night after he drove away, I sat on the cot staring at the call of the wild. I wasn't reading. I was listening. Listening to the wind creep through the cracks, to the tower groan in its bones. And beneath it all, waiting, like the woods were holding their breath. The first 3 days passed in fragments. Morning scans, long afternoons of scribbling in the logbook. Evenings eating canned beans straight from the tin. The silence stretched me thin, pulling every thought louder. Sometimes I'd hum just to hear something human. Sometimes I swore I heard footsteps on the stairs, only to find the ladder empty when I checked. Lisa's voice broke the monotony. She was stationed at Tower 2, a few miles east, and her radio crackled in on the second night. "Tower 1, this is Tower 2. You alive over there?" I snatched the receiver like a lifeline. "Yeah, just trying not to go crazy with all this peace and quiet." Her laugh was quick, warm. "Give it a week. The quiet stops being peace and starts feeling like someone's watching you." We talked for an hour about food. She'd smuggled Pop-Tarts, lucky. About why we'd taken the job. Me, escape. Her, adventure. About George and his gruff warnings. Her voice carried sunlight in it, even through static. When she signed off with, "Stay sane, Carter," I almost asked her to keep talking, just to keep the silence away. But the silence always came back. On the fifth night, I was halfway through scanning the tree line when I saw it. A flash. Not fire, not lightning, something metallic catching the last smear of sunset. Between the trees, low to the ground, I froze, breath fogging in the air, squinted, moved my head. Nothing. Just black pine shadows swallowing the earth. But I knew what I'd seen. I told myself it was a hunter's rifle, a scrap of old metal, maybe even my own tired eyes. But the feeling lingered like ice in my chest. Not just that something was there, something wanted to be seen. That was the moment I stopped believing the Rockies were only about fire. The flash stayed in my mind like an afterimage. Even when I crawled back into the cabin and shut the lantern off, I kept seeing it every time I blinked. It hadn't been fire. My instincts screamed that much. But what it had been, that question gnawed like an animal in the walls. Sleep came in fragments. Every creak of the tower woke me. The wind gusted, making the frame shudder like something heavy climbing its bones. Around 2 in the morning, I swore I heard breathing just beyond the window. Not wind, not mine, breathing. I didn't check, didn't move. Just lay there staring at the ceiling until dawn came thin and gray. The next day I reported the sighting, half embarrassed. "Saw some kind of glint near the east ridge," I told the radio, voice trying to sound casual. Static, then George's gravel growl. "Reflection? Metal? Could have been." A pause. "If it was fire, you'd know. Don't waste the frequency on tricks of the eye. Keep your head straight." The line went dead. He didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't tell me to check again. Just cut the transmission as if he didn't want to hear more. That stuck with me worse than the glint itself. By the 6th night, I'd started timing my scans not to the watch, but to Lisa's voice. She'd come on just after dark, every night so far. The static parting for her tone, like a match flaring in pitch. "You sound tired," she said that evening. "Not tired, wired." I laughed. It came out brittle. "The woods don't sleep, neither do I." Classic week 1 jitters. Wait until week 2, then you'll wish the trees did more than sway. What happens in week 2? You start hearing things, thinking too much. Some lookouts last, some pack up before day 10. Her words held humor, but underneath, there was something else. A warning, maybe, or experience. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked. Silence for 3 long beats. Then, "Every night, but then I watch the sunrise and it feels like I'm the only soul alive. That's worth it." I clung to her voice long after the radio clicked silent. The days blurred. I filled my logbook with neat rows of clouds, winds, temperatures, the kind of data that pretended to matter while the real storm churned inside. The woods stayed stubbornly uneventful. No smoke, no storms, just shadows that stretched too far at sunset and the sense of eyes on my back when I turned the key in the logbook's lock. On the 8th day, the radio betrayed me. I'd left it running, faint static hissing like a heartbeat in the corner. When suddenly, voices. Not Lisa, not George. Multiple. Whispering, too low to make out words. I snapped the dial, thinking maybe I'd drifted onto another channel, but the whispers clung like burrs. "Tower 1 to base," I called. "Anyone transmitting?" The whispers cut instantly. Silence. "Tower 1 to Tower 2. Lisa, you copy?" Nothing. Not even static. That night I dreamed of the forest swallowing the tower whole. Woke up slick with sweat, listening for the breathing again. This time I checked the window. Nothing but branches shifting in windless air. By the 10th day, the silence had grown teeth. It gnawed at every second, turning small sounds into crimes. The scrape of my fork, the pop of the cot spring, the slow ticking of my watch. I found myself talking out loud just to remind myself my voice still existed. That was when Lisa stopped answering. 3 nights in a row I tried. Nothing. Just dead static. The kind that makes you think something's behind it. Leaning too close to the mic. On the 4th night, I sat by the radio until my eyes stung, whispering into it like a confessional. "If you can hear me, I don't like this, Lisa. I don't like it at all." The static hissed back. The forest outside looked endless in the moonlight, and, for the first time since I'd arrived, I wished I hadn't taken the job. The breaking point came on the 11th morning. I'd climbed the tower for the routine scan, binoculars heavy in my hands, when something moved in the undergrowth near the river. Not deer, not bear, too upright. I tracked it. A man. At least I thought so. He staggered into the clearing by the riverbank, thin frame bending under an invisible weight, clothes torn, hair plastered to his forehead. Even at distance, I could feel the raw edge of desperation rolling off him. The man tilted his head back suddenly, and though I was too far to hear, I swear I felt the echo of his shout. Arms waving, jerky, pleading. I almost dropped the binoculars. My pulse raced as I scrambled down the ladder, boots hammering each rung. The forest swallowed me whole in seconds. Pine needles crunching beneath as I pushed toward the river. Branches clawed my sleeves. The air thickened, damp with moss and earth. The sound of water rushed closer. Then him. He was standing on the opposite bank now, pale face half hidden in shadow, eyes wild with something that wasn't just fear. "Hey!" I shouted. "You all right?" His head jerked toward me, and his voice cracked the air like glass. "Help, please! You've got to help!" I stepped closer to the bank, nearly slipping in the mud. "What happened?" "Not me." His voice shook, frantic. He jabbed a finger back into the trees behind him. "Him! David Robinson! He's stuck! He broke off suddenly. His gaze lifted past me, into the forest at my back, and whatever he saw drained the color from his face. "Wait, what is it?" I asked, spinning to follow his stare. Nothing but trees. Nothing but dark trunks twisting into sky. When I turned back, the man was gone. No splash, no retreating footsteps. Just empty bank and the river roaring between us. My skin prickled cold. I whispered into the silence, voice raw. "What the hell did I just see?" Part 2. Voices in the silence. I didn't run back to the tower right away. I stood on the riverbank, staring at the opposite side where the stranger had been only seconds before. The water foamed over rocks, rushing hard enough to drown any sound. But I swore I could still feel the echo of his panic clinging to the trees. His voice, hoarse, desperate, hung in the air long after he vanished. Mark Evans. That was the name he'd screamed at me before panic shut his mouth. And then the other, David Robinson. Neither name meant anything to me, but the way he had said it. Like Robinson wasn't just a man, but a problem, a burden, a warning. I finally forced myself to move, boots crunching on pine needles as I climbed back toward the tower. The silence that followed me wasn't the ordinary kind. It was tuned, charged, the way air feels just before lightning. I checked over my shoulder more than once, half expecting to see that pale figure shadowing me through the trees. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breath and the constant paranoia that something had changed in the woods. When I reached Tower 1, I shut the cabin door harder than I meant to. The slam echoed inside, rattling the old window panes. For a long moment, I just leaned against the door, trying to slow my heartbeat. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the radio when I picked it up. Tower 1 to Tower 2. Lisa, you there? Static. Tower 2, this is Daniel Carter, Tower 1. I, saw someone. Some guy calling himself Mark Evans. He said someone named David Robinson is trapped out here. The static deepened, low and steady, like breath pressed against the speaker. I twisted the dials, desperate. Lisa? George? Anyone? Nothing. I put the radio down and forced myself to breathe. Think like an investigator, not a victim. That was what George had drilled into me during training. Log everything. Trust the logbook. Details mattered. I opened the log and scribbled fast, trying to record every detail before it slipped into the fog of memory. Approximate time, location by the river, description of Mark Evans. Thin, pale, frantic. Mention of David Robinson. The act steadied me, gave shape to the chaos clawing at my nerves. But when I finished, the page looked like the testimony of a lunatic. Alone in the cabin, I couldn't shake the idea that the forest had introduced me to its first clue, and then buried it. That night, the whispers returned. I woke just after midnight to the sound of static. The radio I'd left switched off now, glowed faint red, the speaker hissing faintly. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it. Words blurred and fractured by the crackle, but words all the same. Daniel? I bolted upright, every nerve screaming. Lisa? The voice broke into whispers. Multiple voices. Not hers, not George's. Layered, indistinct, like a crowd murmuring behind a locked door. Who is this? I demanded. My own voice sounded too loud in the tiny cabin. Identify yourself. The whispering swelled, like they were pushing against the speaker grill. And then, clear as glass, one word. Run. The radio went silent. I sat there frozen, staring at the glowing dial. 1,000 thoughts scrambled at once. Faulty transmission, prank, auditory hallucination. But the word echoed through me until the silence felt poisoned. The next morning, I climbed the tower ladder for my scan with lead in my chest. The forest stretched endless in every direction, indifferent as always. But something had changed. Movement. Not smoke, not storm, but subtle shifts in the tree line. A ripple of shadow where there shouldn't have been one. The kind of movement that made you feel observed rather than alone. I raised the binoculars. Nothing. Just green and shadow. But I couldn't shake the sensation that dozens of eyes had blinked closed the moment I looked. Tower 1 to Tower 2. I tried again, voice tight. Lisa, I don't know if you can hear this, but I'm picking up strange activity. If you're out there, respond. The line cracked. For a heartbeat, I swore I heard her laugh. The same easy sound from our first conversation. Then it dissolved into static. I spent the rest of the day combing through the cabin for distractions. Rereading the old paperbacks, reorganizing the supplies. Anything to keep my mind off that whisper. That's when I found it, the journal. It had slipped behind the cot, its cover warped with age. Inside, the entries were brief, dated from the 1960s. Notes about weather, fires, animal sightings, standard logs until the handwriting grew erratic. Something moves at night. Not animals. Too tall. Voices in the radio? Not George. Not anyone I know. Can't tell if I'm going mad or if the forest is trying to talk. The final entry was scrawled so hard the pen had torn through the page. Robinson gone. Don't follow. My throat went dry. Robinson. The same name Mark Evans had shouted across the river. I closed the book with shaking hands, every muscle wired tight. It wasn't just me. Someone before me had seen the same things, heard the same voices, and if his last note was true, Robinson hadn't simply vanished. He'd been swallowed. That evening, George finally radioed in. Tower 1, status report. I nearly tripped over myself grabbing the mic. Jesus, George, where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Had a patrol on the West Ridge, he replied calmly. What's your report? I hesitated. How do you report whispers telling you to run? Corpses in journals? Pale men who vanish into thin air? I spotted someone by the river, I said carefully. Claims there's another man, David Robinson, in trouble. Static, then George's dry grunt. You log it? Yes, sir. Then it's logged. Don't go chasing ghosts, Carter. Your job's fire, not missing hikers. Clear? The line clicked dead before I could argue. I sat in silence, staring at the mic. George's tone had been steady, almost bored, but something about it felt rehearsed, as if he'd already expected me to see someone. Sleep refused me that night. I sat at the window, flashlight clenched, watching shadows twitch between trees. At one point, I swore I saw movement near the base of the tower, a figure standing just beyond the edge of the beam. When I swung the light, the spot was empty. By dawn, my nerves were shot. On the 14th day, Lisa's voice returned. I was hunched over the map, eyes burning from lack of sleep, when the radio hissed. Daniel? I froze. Her voice, soft, tentative. Lisa? God, where have you been? Static swallowed her reply. But I caught fragments. They're here. Don't trust. Then silence. I shouted into the receiver until my throat cracked. No answer. By the time the sun dipped, I was no longer just a lookout. I was a detective piecing a case together. Mark Evans screaming names in the forest, a vanished Robinson, a journal that warned against following, and a fellow lookout whose voice flickered between life and static. But unlike any case I'd ever read about in books, this one had no evidence, no witnesses, no logic. Only dread. And dread doesn't fit into a logbook. That night I made a decision. If the Rockies were hiding something, I wasn't going to find it staring out a window. I would follow the map, find the old tower scrawled in pencil, and see for myself what the forest had swallowed. I strapped the flashlight to my belt, slipped the journal into my pocket, and stared out into the black trees. My breath fogged against the glass, and for an instant, I swore I saw a pale face staring back. Then it was gone. Part 3, the abandoned tower. The map looked older than the tower itself, edges curling like burned paper, the pencil marks faint but deliberate. Old Tower scrawled in looping handwriting just west of Tower 2. Next to it, the name Robinson. It wasn't a coincidence. Couldn't be. That night, with the wind rattling the shutters and the radio dead as stone, I made my choice. I wasn't going to wait for George to hand me orders or for Lisa's fragmented voice to return. If the forest was hiding something, if Robinson was real, if Evans hadn't been a hallucination, I needed to see it with my own eyes. The decision didn't feel heroic. It felt necessary. Like if I stayed in that cabin one more night without answers, the silence would finally crawl down my throat and finish the job it had started. I left at dawn. The sun rose slow, bleeding orange into the peaks. But beneath the canopy, the light was weak, filtered through endless rows of pines that seemed to shift closer together as I walked. My boots crunched pine needles, each step deliberate. I kept checking behind me, but the forest gave nothing back. Just the same endless spines of trees, pointing upward like warning fingers. The deeper I went, the more the map seemed to distort. Trails didn't align. Clearings came where there should have been slopes. A compass would have steadied me, but mine spun lazy circles as though something underground was tugging at the needle. Still, I pressed on. By mid-morning, I reached the ridge overlooking a river, the same river where I'd seen Evans. The water churned violently, carrying white foam downstream like fleeing ghosts. For a long while, I stood staring across, half expecting him to stagger out of the trees again, but the opposite bank stayed empty. I nearly turned back then, nearly convinced myself it wasn't worth it, that George was right, that my job was fire, not missing ghosts. But then I heard it, a sound, not the scream from my first night, not the whispers through static. Something worse, dragging, the unmistakable scrape of something heavy pulled across wood. Slow, deliberate, somewhere ahead. My stomach flipped. I turned from the river and followed the sound uphill. Each step felt heavier than the last, my breath shallow, eyes darting between the trunks. The forest grew still, unnaturally so. No bird song, no insects, just the rhythmic drag, punctuated by silence. And then I saw it, the tower. It rose crooked from the ridge like a broken tooth, its frame rusted, wood slats peeling, the ladder hanging like a snapped bone. Sunlight struck its roof, but the structure seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. The dragging sound stopped. I stood frozen at the tree line, staring up at the ruin. For a moment I thought I saw movement at the top, a shadow shifting behind the boarded windows. "Lisa?" I whispered, knowing how impossible that was. No answer. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, to log this madness as derelict structure and leave it for the Rangers. But I couldn't. My curiosity had mutated into something sharper, a need that dug under my ribs. I approached. The closer I got, the worse the stench became. Sickly sweet, like rot clinging to every breath. Flies drifted lazily in the heat, buzzing against my ears. The ladder loomed, rungs flaking rust. I tested one with my boot. It held, but groaned like something in pain. I climbed anyway. Each rung screeched under my weight. My palms stung as rust bit into skin. Halfway up, the smell hit stronger, and I gagged into my sleeve. Above me, the platform groaned in the breeze. When I hauled myself onto the landing, my legs trembled. The boards flexed dangerously, creaking like they wanted to give way. I forced myself toward the cabin door, half hoping it would be locked. It wasn't. The door hung crooked, its hinges bent, as if forced open and half-heartedly closed again. I pushed and it swung inward with a long sigh. The room beyond was chaos. Wrappers scattered in corners, cans dented and rust-streaked, piles of refuse buzzing with flies. The air was thick, hot with decay. My flashlight beam caught the edges of claw marks scratched into the floorboards. Deep, uneven, frantic. And then the bed. I'll never forget the bed. A man lay twisted in its sheets, chest rising no more. His head lolled to the side, eyes clouded gray. A wallet perched open on his chest like some grim identifier. The name inside confirmed what my gut already screamed. David Robinson. A knife lay across him, its blade stained black with what once had been blood. The mattress beneath was mottled with dried stains, the story of his final moments etched in every discoloration. But it wasn't just the body. It was the drag marks leading away from the bed, gouges in the floor that cut toward the door, as if something had tried to take him, only to give up and leave him displayed like a warning. My breath came shallow, every nerve alight. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't just some old tower left to rot. Something had happened here. Something violent. I forced myself closer, hand trembling as I aimed the flashlight over the body. Flies scattered, their buzzing rising like static. I saw the way Robinson's fingers curled unnaturally, stiffened in a death grip. I saw the faintest smile carved into the corner of his lips, though whether it was defiance or horror, I couldn't tell. A floorboard popped behind me. I spun, flashlight shaking. The doorframe stood empty, nothing but shadows leaning across the filth. But I knew what I'd heard. My chest heaved as I backed toward the ladder, unwilling to turn my back on the room. The beam swept across walls smeared with something dark. Words scratched into wood. I only had a second to make them out before fear pushed me to flee. Not alone. I scrambled down the ladder, nearly missing the last rungs. My boots hit dirt, and I ran. Branches tore at my jacket as I crashed through the forest, heart hammering so loud it drowned the world. The stench clung to me, the flies still buzzing in phantom swarms around my ears. I didn't stop until Tower 1 loomed again, familiar, rickety, but mercifully mine. I slammed the cabin door shut, chest heaving, flashlight beam shaking against the walls. The radio waited on the desk. I grabbed it like a drowning man, thumb pressed white on the switch. Tower 1 to base. George, do you copy? Tower 2, Lisa? Anyone? Please respond. Static. I tried again, shouting this time. There's a body. David Robinson, dead in the old tower. Someone needs to... The static deepened, crackling sharp, and then a voice slipped through. Not George, not Lisa. Saw you? My stomach turned cold. Climbed down, ran. The voice was broken, distant but undeniably mine. It was my voice echoing back at me. The radio snapped to silence. I dropped it, bile rising in my throat. The cabin's walls pressed tighter. The forest beyond the window looked darker, hungrier. And for the first time since I arrived, I knew this wasn't just loneliness playing tricks. Something out there was watching, and it wanted me to know it. The cabin felt like a coffin. I paced its narrow floorboards until the wood complained under my boots, the sound just sharp enough to convince me I wasn't being swallowed whole. Every time I glanced at the radio, I half expected it to flare alive with my own voice again, mocking me from the dark. I forced myself to breathe, to think. What had I really seen in that tower? The corpse, the knife, the drag marks. Those were facts. Facts I could touch, smell, write down. Robinson was real. He had been stationed here once, and now he was gone. The journal in my pocket proved someone had known his name before me. The pale stranger had screamed it from across the river. This was no invention. But my own voice? That was something else entirely. I turned the memory over in my head until I thought I might peel away the skin of my sanity. Maybe it had been a bad feedback loop. Maybe the radio caught some scrap of old transmission, distorted into something resembling my words. Maybe. But it hadn't been garbled. It had been precise. Saw you. Climbed down. Ran. Exactly what I had done. I shut the curtains and sat on the cot, pulling the journal open to the last few pages. The ink scratches were heavy, manic. Robinson gone. Don't follow. The writer hadn't been warning himself. He'd been warning the next man. Me? I slammed the book shut and whispered, "Too late." That night, the silence pressed harder than ever. No wind, no rustle, no creak. As if the forest itself was listening to me breathe. I dragged the desk chair to the door and braced it under the knob. Then I climbed the ladder to the small observation platform, flashlight clutched against my chest. From up there, the world looked endless. The treetops stretched black and sharp beneath a starless sky, the ridges rising jagged like teeth. My beam cut only a narrow cone through the dark. I swept it back and forth, searching for what I didn't want to see. At first, nothing. Just the ordinary nightmare of an empty forest. Then, movement. Half a mile east, something pale darted between the trunks. Too fast for my eyes to lock on. I froze, waiting for it to reappear, but the trees swallowed it whole. "Evans," I whispered, though my throat had already gone dry. The night answered with a sound that made my stomach clench. A laugh, high, broken, stretched thin by distance, but unmistakably human. It wasn't Lisa's. The laugh spiraled into the hush of the forest until it faded, leaving the silence bruised and alive. I gripped the flashlight harder, my knuckles aching white. The beam swept, desperate. My heart jackhammered against my ribs, begging me to climb back down, to bury my head under the cot and wait for dawn. But I stayed rooted, transfixed by the possibility that something was watching me even now, hidden among 1,000 shadows. Time bled out. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. Eventually, the adrenaline burned itself down to ash, and my eyelids sagged despite terror's grip. I slumped against the platform railing, flashlight heavy in my lap, promising myself I'd stay awake. When I opened my eyes, it was daylight. The flashlight lay dead in my hand. My breath fogged pale in the early chill, and for the briefest second, I thought maybe it had been a dream. The corpse, the voice, the laugh, all of it. But then I looked down. At the base of Tower 1, half buried in pine needles, 3 shell casings gleamed, brass still smelling faintly of powder. I scrambled down the ladder, heart in my throat. Kneeling in the dirt, I touched one, rolling it between trembling fingers. Fired recently, not decades ago. Someone had been here, someone with a gun, and they hadn't fired at animals. I straightened slowly, scanning the tree line. The forest waited, patient, silent. But now the silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, the way a chamber waits for a trigger. By the time I climbed back inside, I'd already decided I couldn't stay here. Not like this. I spread the map on the desk, fingers tracing the lines between towers. My pulse jumped at the pencil scrawl. Old Tower. Robinson's name scratched beside it, and just north, Tower 2. Lisa's post. If she was alive, if that voice hadn't been a trick, then I had to find her. I stuffed the journal, flashlight, and a canteen into my pack. My side throbbed with the phantom ache of exhaustion, but I ignored it. If I stayed, I'd rot in this tower like Robinson. If I left, maybe I'd find answers. Or at least someone else who could hear me scream. I pulled the door open. The air outside hit me damp and cold, the kind of chill that carried weight. The trees leaned closer, their shadows longer than they should have been. I hesitated on the threshold, convinced that if I stepped out, something would be waiting just beyond sight. But staying wasn't an option. I descended the hill and plunged into the forest. The trail dissolved quickly. Roots tangled underfoot. Shadows bled into one another until direction itself felt suspect. I clung to the map, repeating the heading under my breath like a prayer. North, north, north. The silence followed. Not a natural hush, but a calculated one, as though the forest had dismissed all noise to hear me better. When I paused, it paused. When I hurried, it seemed to lean closer, breathing down my neck. Once I swore I heard whispers behind me, faint as falling leaves. I spun, nothing, just pines stretching into infinity. By noon, the sky had vanished behind clouds. The light dimmed, and the forest shifted into monochrome, shadows deepening into bruises. My boots slipped on damp moss as I climbed a ridge. At the top, I caught sight of something through the trees, a shape on the horizon, a tower. I pressed forward, branches snapping against my jacket, breath heaving. But as it came into view, my excitement curdled into dread. It wasn't Tower 2. It was another tower, older than the old one I'd already visited. Its skeleton leaned against the sky, rusted through, wood sagging like rotted bone. It looked as though it had been abandoned half a century ago, a relic no map dared to admit still existed. And yet smoke curled faintly from its roof. I stopped dead, chest tight. My instinct screamed to turn back, to find the correct heading, to pretend this tower didn't exist. But my curiosity, damned, burning curiosity, drew me closer. The closer I got, the stronger the stench became. Not rot this time, not death, something acrid, chemical, like burnt plastic or scorched metal. The latter hung crooked, half detached from the frame. My flashlight beam caught gouges in the dirt below, boot prints deep and recent. Someone had climbed this tower, and maybe they hadn't come back down. The ladder groaned as though it remembered the weight of everyone who had climbed before me. I gripped the sides and tested the first rung. It wobbled but held. The smell hit harder as I ascended, an acrid tang of burned chemicals mingling with something older, sweeter, fouler. My throat tightened. My flashlight shook in my hand, the beam jerking across rusted bolts and warped boards. Halfway up, I heard it, a shuffle above me, slow, deliberate, as though something dragged its feet across the platform. I froze, breath clamped in my chest. Every instinct begged me to let go, to drop back into the dirt and vanish into the trees. But if I fled, I'd never know. And ignorance was worse than fear. I forced myself upward. Each rung screamed protest until I pulled myself onto the platform. The tower's cabin looked worse up close. Its walls sagged inward, boards rotted and blackened. The door was cracked open, a dark slit like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. Smoke curled faintly from inside, as if a fire had long since burned out but left its stink clinging to the air. I nudged the door with the beam of my light. It swung inward on rusted hinges. The room was a tomb. Ash coated the floor in thick layers. The remains of a desk slumped against one wall, its legs burned through. A cot lay charred, sheets reduced to brittle flakes. My light swept over collapsed rafters and blackened cans split open from heat. But what made my skin crawl wasn't the destruction. It was the marks, symbols scratched into the walls, jagged spirals, crosshatches, looping shapes that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. Some had been carved deep into the wood, as though etched in panic. Others painted in what looked like tar or something darker. At the center of the room, half buried in ash, lay a pile of bones. Small, human. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the threshold. My flashlight shook across the room, landing on something shiny wedged between the cot's blackened frame. A badge. I crouched, throat dry, and brushed away soot. A ranger's badge. I turned it over with trembling fingers. The engraving was faint, but legible. David Robinson. The world tilted. My pulse thundered in my ears. Robinson wasn't just a corpse in the other tower. He was here too, or what was left of him. I staggered upright, clutching the badge, mind reeling. None of this made sense. How could he be in two places at once? Unless one of them wasn't real. Unless both were. Unless... The floor creaked behind me. I whipped around, light slicing the ash. Nothing. But the air moved. Thick, heavy, pushing against me as though something unseen had entered the room. My skin prickled, my hair standing sharp. And then, through the static crackle of my radio clipped to my belt, a voice. "Daniel?" Lisa. Weak, distorted, but hers. "Lisa!" I shouted, fumbling for the mic. "Where are you? What the hell's happening here?" "Don't... stay!" Her voice collapsed into static. The floor groaned again, and this time I didn't wait. I bolted from the cabin, leaping onto the ladder so fast I nearly missed the first rung. My boots skidded against rust, palms scraping raw, but I didn't stop. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and scrambled to my feet. The tower loomed above me, silent and crooked, the slit of its doorway black as a grave. Smoke no longer poured from the cabin. It was as though the fire and everything inside had vanished the moment I fled. I didn't look back again. The forest swallowed me as I ran, branches whipping at my face, my lungs searing. I didn't stop until my legs buckled, sending me to my knees in a bed of pine needles. I pressed the badge to my chest, gasping. Robinson's name burned in my palm. 2 towers, 2 corpses. 1 man. I tried the radio again, desperation fraying my voice. "Lisa, talk to me, please." Static, then a whisper. "You're close." I froze. It wasn't Lisa's voice. I dropped the radio like it had burned me, staggered to my feet, and shoved the badge deep into my pocket. My thoughts clawed at themselves, the journal's warnings, Evans's frantic plea, George's dismissive calm. None of it fit together, and all of it screamed the same truth. This forest wasn't empty. It wasn't silent. It was full. The way back stretched endless, every tree a mirror of the last. My compass spun lazily, mocking me. Panic gnawed my resolve, whispering that I'd never find Tower 1 again, that the forest would keep me like it had kept Robinson. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The light dimmed. The trees thickened. My breath rasped louder than my thoughts. And then, just as hopelessness closed its fist around me, I saw it, the outline of Tower 1, rising crooked above the trees. Relief broke through me so sudden I nearly cried. I stumbled toward it, boots dragging, throat raw. The cabin door banged against the wall as I burst inside, slamming it shut behind me, safe, for now. I collapsed onto the cot, the badge clutched in my hand. The silence swelled, thick and patient. And for the first time since arriving, I wondered if George had sent me here not to protect the forest, but to keep me inside it. The radio sat on the desk, dead quiet, until it wasn't. It snapped alive with a burst of static so sharp I flinched. Then, Lisa's voice again, clearer than before. "Daniel, they know you've seen it." My breath caught. "Lisa, where are you? What is this place? What happened to Robinson?" Static hissed like laughter. "Not Robinson," she whispered. "Not anymore." The line went dead. I stared at the radio, bile rising in my throat as the truth settled cold and heavy in my chest. Whatever was in this forest, it didn't just kill, it replaced. Part 4. Breaking Point. The forest does not whisper. That's what I used to believe. Trees creak, branches scrape, wind howls, but the woods themselves, they do not speak. I don't believe that anymore. By the time the 17th night rolled over Tower 1, silence had become language. The woods didn't just watch. They murmured, hissed, tested my name in the dark until I couldn't tell if the voice was outside the cabin or inside my head. Sleep was no longer a refuge. It was a trap. Because when I slept, the forest spoke louder. And that night, it used her voice. Daniel. Lisa, clear, confident. Not the fragmented whispers I'd caught before, but her real voice, steady and sure. I jolted awake on the cot, flashlight clenched so hard my palm ached. The cabin was drowned in shadows, only the faint glow of the radio dial bleeding against the wall. Lisa? I croaked, throat raw. Help me, she said. Her voice trembled on the static, as though distance warped it, but it was her, undeniably her. Daniel, they found me. I stumbled to the desk, grabbed the receiver. Where are you? Are you still in Tower 2? Static. A hollow crackle like something breathing into the line. Lisa, talk to me. North. The word came fractured, drawn out, drowning in static. Hurry. Before they... The transmission snapped dead. I stood there in the stale dark, radio heavy in my hand, heartbeat thrumming against my ribs. For a moment I convinced myself it was just another trick. Another hallucination, like the voice that had mimicked mine. But this wasn't mimicry, it was Lisa. Terrified, begging, alive. I couldn't ignore it. I strapped the flashlight to my chest, shoved the journal and Robinson's badge into my pocket, and pulled on my jacket. My side throbbed from exhaustion, but I barely noticed. The door groaned as I shoved it open, spilling me into a forest so black it swallowed the stars. The silence closed in immediately. That wrong kind of silence, the kind that isn't absence, but intent. My boots crunched the needles too loud, my breath too shallow. The trees stood as they always had, immovable, endless. But I felt them bending closer, listening. North. That's what she'd said. I repeated it under my breath like prayer. North, north, north. The compass in my pocket spun circles again, useless. So I fixed my heading by the ridges, tracing the jagged horizon, forcing myself forward. The beam of my light jittered across trunks, catching pale shapes in the corner of my eye that vanished when I turned. Hours bled into each other. Once I thought I heard footsteps behind me, perfectly matched to mine. I stopped. So did they. I walked again. So did they. When I spun, the trees stared back, innocent, silent. By midnight, the cold gnawed my bones. Sweat cooled against my skin, making every gust sting. My legs trembled, but I didn't dare stop, because the moment I paused, I swore I could hear whispers rising again, faint as breath on glass. And then I saw it. Through the black mesh of trees, a light. Flickering. Weak, but real. A lantern glow, swaying like someone was moving. Lisa, I shouted, the word tearing from my throat. The light stopped. For a second, everything froze. The air, the shadows, my own heartbeat. Then the lantern swayed again, farther away, as if retreating. I chased it. Branches whipped my face, roots snared my boots, but I kept running, lungs burning. The glow bobbed ahead, leading me deeper into the forest. At times it nearly vanished, only to flare again just as I faltered. It was as though the light knew exactly how far to stay, exactly how much hope to drip into me before pulling it away again. Finally it stopped at the base of a clearing. I stumbled into the open, gasping light beam cutting across tall grass. The lantern hung from a low branch, swaying gently. Alone. No hand held it. I froze. My light swept the clearing, and froze again. At the far edge, standing just at the tree line, was Mark Evans. His pale frame trembled in the glow, dirty hair plastered across his forehead. He raised a hand, frantic, desperate. You came, he rasped, voice ragged. Thank God, you came. I swallowed hard, the bile thick in my throat. Evan, where's Lisa? Where's Robinson? He staggered forward, eyes wild. It's too late for Robinson, but her, you can still save her. They took her north, past the ridge. You have to move now. The words tumbled out of him like broken glass, sharp and jagged. Who? I demanded. Who took her? His gaze snapped to the trees behind him. For an instant, sheer terror cut across his face. He flinched like an animal startled by its predator. Then, without another word, he bolted into the forest and vanished. "Evans!" I screamed, my voice cracking. The only answer was the sway of the abandoned lantern. I stood there trembling, torn between chasing him and collapsing. Every instinct screamed this was a trap, a lure set to pull me deeper. But Lisa's voice clung to me, urgent, pleading. I chose north. The terrain grew harsher, the slope dragging me upward over jagged rocks. My boots slipped, sending pebbles skittering down the ridge. The trees thinned just enough to reveal the silhouette of something ahead. A tower, but not Tower 2. This one was older still. Its frame leaned so far it looked ready to topple, railings rusted to lace. At its base, the earth was scarred, deep grooves carved into dirt like something had been dragged. I crouched, running my fingers along the marks. Fresh, not days, hours. A sound prickled the air, not wind, not animal. A voice. "Help!" It came faint and broken, but close. I jerked my head up. "Lisa!" The voice repeated. "Help me!" This time it wasn't Lisa's voice. It was mine. I staggered back, bile surging, eyes darting to the shadows. The forest seemed to press tighter, every tree trunk hiding something just out of sight. My own voice echoed again, closer now, dripping from the branches like rot. "Daniel, hurry!" "No," I whispered, clutching my head. "Not real. Not real." But the dragging sound started again. Something heavy being pulled across wood, from above, from the cabin at the top of the leaning tower. My flashlight beam cut upward. The door hung half open, blackness yawning inside. The dragging continued, louder now, until it felt like it was grinding against my bones. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I climbed the ladder, every rung screaming under my weight. The smell hit halfway up, sweet, foul, rotting. The kind of smell you don't forget once it touches your lungs. I forced myself higher, gagging until I hauled onto the platform. The dragging stopped. The cabin door swayed in the wind, hinges crying. My light spilled into the room, and there, sprawled across the floor, was Lisa. Her face was pale, lips cracked, eyes wide open but glassy. A rope coiled her wrists, skin raw where she'd struggled. She twitched once, a shallow gasp rattling from her chest. "Lisa!" I lunged forward, cutting the rope with my knife, hauling her up. She was cold, too cold, her body shivering violently. Her lips parted, voice rasping. "Daniel, don't!" "What?" I shook her, panic choking me. "Don't what?" Her eyes darted past me, toward the door. The sound returned, dragging, but not from inside, from below. Something was climbing the ladder. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed Lisa, slinging her arm over my shoulders. She groaned weakly, barely able to stand. My flashlight beam jittered toward the door, then down to the ladder, and froze. Hands, pale, too long, fingers curling over the rungs. Another hand, another, one after another, dragging something upward, not climbing, hauling. Like a corpse being pulled by invisible strings. I backed into the cabin, heart ramming against my ribs. The thing climbed with patience, with certainty. It knew I wouldn't jump. It knew I'd wait. Lisa whispered again, weaker this time. "Don't look at its face." The words rooted terror into my bones. The dragging grew louder, closer. The hands reached the platform, curling onto the boards, pulling the body behind. I did the only thing I could. I slammed the door shut and braced it with my shoulder, holding Lisa against me, breath shallow. The boards creaked, the hinges groaned, something pressed from outside, testing, patient. And then, with a voice that was mine but not mine, it whispered through the wood. "Saw you." The door rattled. "Climb down," Lisa whimpered, nails digging into my sleeve. "Ran." I shut my eyes, whispering back, "Not real, not real." But when I opened them, the words were carved into the door itself. Not real. And outside, the dragging stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound I'd ever heard. The silence after the dragging stopped was suffocating. It didn't feel like quiet anymore. It felt like the tower itself had stopped breathing. The air was too still, too heavy, pressing against my chest until every inhale burned. Lisa's weight sagged against me, her head rolling weakly onto my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't dare. The words gouged into the door seemed to glow in the beam of my flashlight. Not real. The grooves were fresh, splinters curling outward as if invisible claws had scored them seconds ago. "Lisa," I whispered, "we have to move. Now." Her lips trembled. "If you open it." The rest of her warning dissolved into a cough, wet and rattling. The wood beneath my shoulder vibrated suddenly, not a knock, a scrape. Something dragged along the outside of the door, slow and deliberate, circling the edges. A finger, I thought, or something worse. The vibration followed the frame, creeping around the seams like it was learning the shape of the barrier, keeping it out. Then silence again. Waiting. I forced my legs to move. With one arm bracing Lisa, I stumbled backward toward the shattered cot. "We'll wait for daylight," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to me. She shook her head faintly, eyes glassy. "Daylight won't stop it." Her words cracked something inside me. For the first time, I realized I wasn't clinging to the hope of rescue anymore. I was clinging to the hope that the thing outside would get bored. Leave. Forget about me. But it wasn't going to forget. It had been watching too long. The radio on my belt crackled suddenly. I jumped, fumbling with it. "Daniel!" The voice was George's. Rough, steady. "George!" My voice cracked. "Thank God. I found Lisa. She's alive but hurt. We're trapped in a tower. Something's out there. Something's trying to get in." "Stay calm," George said. His tone was flat, eerily calm. "Where are you?" I don't know. North Ridge, maybe half a mile past the river. It's old, abandoned. You have to send someone, George, please." The line crackled. Then, "Listen carefully, son. If you've seen Robinson, if you've heard the voices, don't come back." My blood froze. "What? You weren't supposed to go there." His voice deepened, flat with something I couldn't name. "Once you see it, it doesn't let go. Doesn't matter how far you run." The radio clicked dead. "George! George!" I screamed into the static. Nothing. Lisa's eyes met mine, wide and trembling. Her lips shaped the words, barely audible. "He knew." The boards outside groaned suddenly. Something heavy pressed against the wall, testing the weight of the entire structure. The tower shuddered, dust raining from the beams. "Move!" I hissed, dragging Lisa upright. "We're climbing down." Her legs buckled, but fear lent me strength I didn't have. I hauled her to the door and yanked it open, bracing for what waited on the platform. Nothing. Just the night, endless and black. But the ladder groaned before I touched it. Something was already climbing up. I pointed the flashlight downward. The beam caught movement. Pale fingers curling around the rungs, pulling. The same two long hands I had seen before. They flexed, nails scraping metal, slow but unstoppable. Lisa whimpered, clinging to me. We couldn't wait. We couldn't fight. I turned, spotted the shattered window on the far wall, and without thinking, smashed it wider with the butt of my flashlight. The glass bit into my arm, hot blood streaking, but adrenaline shoved the pain aside. "Hold on to me," I barked. She clutched weakly as I hooked an arm under her and shoved us both through the window. For one terrible second, we dangled above 30 feet of air. Then we fell, crashing into the branches of a pine below. The impact knocked the wind from me. Branches clawed my back, snapping under our combined weight. Lisa groaned, twisting against my grip, but I didn't let go. We tumbled hard into the dirt, a spray of needles cushioning the fall just enough to keep us alive. Above us, the tower shook violently. The thing had reached the platform. The whole structure groaned, timbers shrieking like they might collapse. I staggered up, dragging Lisa with me, and bolted into the forest. My vision tunneled. Every breath cut my throat raw. Behind us, the dragging began again. Not footsteps, dragging, as though the thing had no legs, only will. Branches whipped our faces. Roots tore at our boots. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The forest seemed to warp around us, trees closing in, guiding us back toward the nightmare we had fled. But sheer terror drove me forward until I saw a familiar shape rising against the horizon. Tower 1. Home, or what passed for it. By the time we reached the clearing, dawn was bleeding pale across the ridges. I shoved Lisa inside, slammed the door, and locked it. Then I collapsed, chest heaving, back against the wall. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence inside was thick, broken only by Lisa's shallow breaths. Finally, I turned to her. "What is it?" I whispered. "What's in these woods?" Her eyes glistened with tears. "Not what? Who?" She shuddered, curling in on herself. "They wear us. Robinson. He didn't die. Not like we think. They hollowed him out, took his shape. That's what Evan saw. That's what George knew. That's what's been calling to you." Her words twisted my gut. Hollowed, worn, like clothes. I thought of Robinson's corpse. I thought of the bones in the burned tower. I thought of my own voice echoing back at me, mocking my steps. And I realized she was right. The radio hissed again. Both of us froze. George's voice seeped through the static, calm, reassuring. "Tower 1, this is base. Situation's under control. Remain where you are. Help is coming." For a heartbeat, relief washed through me. Then Lisa grabbed my wrist, nails digging deep. "That's not him," she hissed. "Don't you hear it? It's wearing him." My mouth went dry. The radio repeated, firmer this time. "Remain where you are. Help is coming." But the words weren't quite right. The cadence was wrong. The voice dragged in strange places like a mask slipping. Lisa buried her face against me, shaking. "If you let it in, we're finished." The radio clicked again. "Daniel?" My name, spoken in my own voice. And with that, the last pieces of safety shattered. I dropped the radio, its glow bleeding across the floor like a wound, and pressed my fists against my temples. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Not George, not Lisa, not even me. The forest had hollowed truth into lies, and the lies wore our voices like flesh. Outside in the gray wash of dawn, something snapped. A branch, then another, closer. I lifted my head. The trees stood still, silent. But I knew it hadn't stopped following us. It never would. Part 5, Truth or Madness. By the time the sun crept fully over the ridges, I no longer trusted daylight. I used to believe dawn brought clarity, that the shadows shrank, that the night's hallucinations bled away into reason. But that morning, the light seemed crueler. It exposed the cabin for what it was. A box of rotting wood balanced above a forest that had already claimed me. Lisa lay curled on the cot, eyes shut but restless, her lips trembling around dreams I didn't want to imagine. I sat at the desk, Robinson's badge and the journal laid out before me, and tried to piece the fragments into a whole. But the puzzle didn't want solving. It wanted to scatter, to keep me circling forever until I joined Robinson, until the forest hollowed me out and wore my face. The radio hissed occasionally, faint and taunting. I kept it off, but the static bled through anyway, as if the switch no longer mattered. At noon, the sound of an engine shattered the silence. I leapt to the window, half in disbelief. A truck rattled up the hill, tires spitting gravel. Behind the wheel, unmistakable even through the glare, was George. Relief and dread tangled in my chest. "Lisa," I shook her awake. "He's here. George is here." Her eyes shot open, wild. "No," she croaked. "It's not him." "Don't trust it." But when the truck stopped and George stepped out, boots crunching the dirt, he looked as solid and human as ever. His beard, his bulk, the way he scanned the tree line with the casual vigilance of a man who'd spent decades out here. "You look like hell, kid," he said, voice gruff but steady. I almost collapsed in relief, almost, but Lisa's grip on my sleeve stopped me. Her nails dug deep, her head shaking violently. George's gaze flicked to her, then back to me. "She doesn't look much better. What the hell happened out here?" I opened the door but didn't step out. "You tell me. You knew. About Robinson. About Evans. About whatever this is." His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" You told me not to come back, I snapped. You knew once I saw Robinson, it wouldn't let go. Your exact words. For the first time, George hesitated. His jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Daniel, whatever you think you heard, it wasn't me. Behind me, Lisa hissed. He's lying. Don't you hear it? I turned to her. She was trembling, pale, sweat shining across her brow, but her eyes burned sharp, urgent. They wear us, she whispered again. It's already wearing him. George's voice rose firm. She's delirious. Look at her. She can barely stand. You want to trust her over me? I trained you, Carter. I put you in this tower. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be standing here. The weight of his words pressed down. Logic told me he was right. Emotion told me Lisa was right. And underneath both, the forest whispered that I was already too far gone to know either way. Come on, George said softer now. Let's get you both out of here. Tower 2's compromised, Tower 4's abandoned. We'll head back to the station, regroup. This job's done. The offer was a lifeline. I wanted to grab it, let him drag me out of this nightmare, back to asphalt and neon lights and human voices that didn't echo through static. But my feet didn't move, because in the pit of my stomach, I knew. Whether George was real or not, the forest wouldn't let me leave. Lisa must have felt the same, because she whispered, if you walk out with him, you won't come back. Not as you. The radio flared to life on the desk, cutting the air with a sharp burst of static. And then, my voice. Stay inside. My blood ran cold. George's eyes snapped to the radio. His expression flickered, just for an instant, into something I couldn't name. Hunger, maybe, or recognition. Turn that damn thing off, he growled, but I couldn't move. My own voice echoed again, softer, urgent. Stay inside, Daniel. Don't follow. The last words were identical to the journal's final entry. My knees buckled. The world swam. Lisa clutched me, dragging me back from collapse, whispering over and over, not him. Not him. George's hand twitched toward the doorframe, fingers flexing too long, too sharp. For a blink, his shadow warped against the floor, stretched, wrong, inhuman. Then he smiled, a small, patient smile. Suit yourself, kid, but don't expect me to come back when you change your mind. He turned, climbed back into the truck, and drove slowly down the hill. The engine's rumble faded, swallowed by the trees. For a long time I stood frozen, waiting for the forest to release the breath it held. It never did. Lisa sagged against the cot again, whispering, you see it now. You see what I saw. I wanted to deny it, wanted to tell myself George had been real, that the shadow was just exhaustion, that the forest wasn't hollowing me out piece by piece. But when I looked at the door, the gouges were still there, not real. And I knew with a clarity that hurt that the forest wasn't lying. Lisa didn't sleep again. She couldn't. Neither could I. We sat in silence as the hours crawled, the radio occasionally spitting bursts of static like it was clearing its throat, waiting for the next imitation. I caught myself staring at Lisa, wondering if she was real, if her blood still ran her own, or if she too had been hollowed out. She must have felt my suspicion because she whispered without looking at me. If I wasn't me, you'd already be gone. The simplicity of it chilled me more than the forest's silence. By mid-afternoon, hunger gnawed through exhaustion. I opened one of the last cans on the shelf, forcing down metallic-tasting spaghetti. Lisa refused, shaking her head as though eating would invite something in. When I looked back at the window, I froze. Tracks. The clearing outside bore fresh prints in the dirt. Boot prints, clear and deliberate, circling the base of the tower. Not George's truck tires, not my boots. These were heavier, deeper. Someone or something had walked around Tower 1 while we sat inside, unaware. I gripped the radio. George, I said, testing. If you're out there, identify yourself. The response came instantly. Too instantly. It's me. My skin crawled. Open the door. Lisa's nails dug into my arm. Don't, she mouthed. The prince circled twice, then vanished into the tree line. I shut the curtains and backed away. The forest had stopped pretending to be far away. It was here, pacing just beyond wood and glass. That night, I dreamt of Robinson. Not the corpse on the bed, not the badge in my pocket. Something worse. He stood in the tower's corner, hollow-eyed, lips parted. His chest rose, but not with breath, with something pushing from inside, like hands pressing outward from beneath his skin. His voice was my voice. Your turn. I woke gagging, bile burning my throat, the flashlight trembling in my grip. Lisa was already awake, staring at the door as if she hadn't blinked in hours. They don't want me, she whispered, voice frayed. They want you. Her certainty was worse than any doubt. By dawn, I'd made my decision. We couldn't wait for George. Couldn't trust the radio, couldn't stay. We're leaving, I said. Lisa shook her head violently. You don't walk out. That's how they take you. They'll take us if we stay, I snapped. My voice cracked in the small space, louder than I'd intended. For a moment, silence thickened. Then the radio answered in my own voice, calm and flat. He's right. The words gutted me. I kicked the radio across the floor, smashing it against the wall. Sparks spat, then silence. Lisa's face tightened. They don't need the radio anymore. The decision held. Whether it was madness or instinct, I had to move. Staying would end with me rotting like Robinson, body twisted in a bed while something else spoke with my throat. We packed what little we had. One flashlight, the journal, Robinson's badge, a knife. Then together we stepped into the forest. The silence swallowed us whole. Every direction looked the same. Pines closed overhead, shadows twisting. But I fixed on the map burned into memory. North Ridge River, station beyond. Civilization, a chance. We walked for hours, each step heavier. No birds, no insects, no sound but our own movements. Once Lisa stumbled and I caught her, my grip tighter than necessary. The truth gnawed me. If she stumbled too close to the forest's edge, would it hollow her out too? Would I? Around midday, we found it. The clearing, a circle of dead grass ringed with blackened stones. Charred bones littered the center. Animal, human, indistinguishable. Ash swirled at the slightest breeze. Lisa froze. This is where they burn what's left. My throat closed. The smell was faint but unmistakable. Charred flesh, long cooled. At the far edge of the circle, something gleamed. I bent, heart pounding, and pulled it from the ash. A radio. Charred, melted. But its label was intact. Tower 2. Lisa's knees buckled. She collapsed into the dirt, shaking her head. That's mine, she whispered. That's supposed to be mine. I didn't know what to say. The forest didn't give me time to find words. The dragging began again, slow, deliberate, circling the clearing. Not leaves. Not footsteps. That same sick scrape of weight pulled across earth, echoing in every bone. Lisa clamped her hands over her ears, rocking. I gripped the knife, turning in frantic circles, flashlight beam cutting the ring of trees. Show yourself, I shouted, though every fiber begged me not to. The dragging stopped. Then a voice. Not mine. Not Lisa's. Not George's. Robinson's. You shouldn't have followed. The words rippled through the clearing, vibrating in my chest. My knees nearly gave out. Lisa sobbed, curling tighter. I spun the light, and there, at the tree line, stood Robinson. Not the corpse, not bones, whole, upright, breathing. His face slack, skin pale, eyes hollow, but upright, watching. He stepped forward, the grass withering under his boots. The dragging followed, though his steps were soundless. Daniel. His lips moved out of sync with the voice. It's time. I staggered back, knife trembling. You're dead. The hollow eyes blinked. Not anymore. Lisa screamed, a raw animal sound that tore the clearing. I grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet, and we ran. Branches tore at us, shadows lunged, but I didn't stop. Behind us, the dragging grew louder, faster, chasing through the trees. Every time I risked a glance back, I swore Robinson was closer, his eyes burning holes through the dark. We stumbled downhill, crashing through brush, until the roar of the river filled the air. My chest heaved with hope, water, a landmark, salvation. We burst onto the bank, foaming rapids raging, but the dragging followed. Across the river, a figure appeared. Mark Evans. He waved frantically, shouting over the roar. "This way! Cross!" Lisa clutched me, sobbing. "No! It's not him! Don't you see?" But Evans's face looked human, terrified, alive. And behind us, Robinson's voice thundered, "Too close now. Your turn." I looked from the river to Lisa to Evans, my chest tearing in two. Every choice was death. Every choice was madness. And still, I had to choose. The river foamed like a beast thrashing against its cage, froth leaping white against jagged rocks. Evans stood on the opposite bank, arms flailing, face pale in the mist. "This way," he screamed. "Cross now before it takes you." His voice cracked with urgency, so human it tore something loose inside me. But Lisa gripped my sleeve with white knuckles. "That's not Evans. You know it isn't. Don't you see how it's leading you?" I spun, heart breaking in my chest. Behind us, Robinson lumbered into view at the edge of the clearing. His eyes were pits, his mouth hanging open, voice booming through both forest and skull. "Daniel." The dragging followed each step, as though unseen chains bound him, pulled him, and yet he came closer, relentless. Lisa's nails tore into my skin. "If you follow Evans, you'll never come back. If you stay, at least you'll still be you." But Evans's arms flailed wilder, his voice shredding through the roar. "I'm real, Carter. You know me. Don't let her trick you. She's not Lisa anymore. Look at her. Look at her." Her eyes met mine then, wet and blazing. For one sickening second, I saw what he meant. Her skin pale, too pale. Lips moving too fast for words to match. Voice always rasped and broken. Hadn't I wondered, even back in Tower 1, if she was already hollowed? Hadn't she admitted they didn't want her? They wanted me? The river roared. Robinson dragged closer. Evans begged. Lisa clung. Something broke in me. With a scream, I shoved Lisa off my arm and bolted toward the bank. Her cry split the air, raw betrayal, but my legs didn't stop. The rapids howled, spray soaking my face, the rocks slick underfoot. Evans reached toward me, his eyes wide, desperate. "Jump!" I leapt. The river caught me like a fist. Freezing water swallowed me whole, tumbling me through foam and stone. My skull cracked against something hard, stars bursting across black. I clawed upward, lungs burning, fingers scraping at nothing. The current dragged me down, deeper, colder, until the roar became silence. And in that silence, voices. Not Evans, not Lisa, not George, not even Robinson. All of them, at once, whispers layering over whispers, forming my name, stretching it, hollowing it. "Daniel? Daniel?" The darkness peeled open like an eye. When I woke, I lay on the riverbank, coughing water, chest on fire. My flashlight was gone, my knife too. Across the river, the trees stood silent. No Evans, no Lisa, no Robinson. Just forest. Watching. The badge still lay clenched in my fist. Robinson's name etched into its face. I staggered up, swaying, body trembling like I'd left half of it behind in the current. My eyes burned, my thoughts frayed. But one thing was clear. I wasn't alone anymore. Something had come with me. The hike back to Tower 1 was a blur. The woods twisted themselves, paths bending wrong, roots snagging, shadows stretching. At times I swore the trees whispered in unison, each syllable carving my name into bark. When the tower finally rose above the ridge, I nearly collapsed from relief. I crawled inside, slammed the door, locked it, and pressed my forehead against the wood. Safe, or so I thought, because the radio was already on. Its dial glowed red, brighter than I'd ever seen, humming low. I stepped closer, breath shallow. The speaker crackled. "Daniel Carter, this is Base," George's voice. "Your rotation's complete. Pack your gear. We'll send a truck at dawn." The words were calm, professional, ordinary. But I knew. I knew because the voice was too smooth, too clean, like a mask fitted over static. I knew because when it said my name, the sound vibrated in my bones. I knew because Lisa, Evans, Robinson, all of them had warned me in one way or another. And I knew because in the reflection on the radio's glass, the face staring back wasn't mine. Its eyes were hollow, its lips curled into a smile I didn't make. Your turn. The words didn't come from the speaker. They came from me. I staggered back, bile rising. My hands trembled in front of me, but they didn't look like mine anymore. Too pale, too long. The journal fell open on the desk. The last page, blank before, now bore fresh ink. Letters still wet. Daniel Carter, gone. Don't follow. I screamed, grabbing the chair, hurling it against the wall. But the words didn't fade. The ink gleamed darker, soaking deeper, as though the forest itself had written me down. Outside, the dragging started again. Closer, louder, surrounding the tower. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound bled through bone. Chains scraping, flesh pulling, voices whispering, my name repeated over and over until I couldn't tell if it was the forest or me saying it. My flashlight flickered once, then died. The tower went dark, and in that dark, I saw them, all of them. Robinson in the bed, Robinson by the burned tower, Robinson on the clearing's edge, Lisa sobbing, Evans screaming, George's patient smile, and me reflected in every window, every shadow, every drop of black glass. They were all the same, all hollow, all worn, and now I was one of them. The forest had made sure of it. I don't remember how much time has passed, days, weeks, maybe longer. The journal fills itself now. I don't write anymore. The words simply appear, my hand moving without me. Sometimes I read them, sometimes I don't. It doesn't matter. The radio never stops. My voice talks from it day and night, giving reports, laughing, begging. Sometimes George answers, sometimes Lisa. Sometimes all of them at once. The tower creaks in the wind, but I don't leave. There's no reason to. The forest has me. The Rockies have me. And if you're reading this, if you've taken my post, if you've climbed the ladder of Tower 1 and opened the cabin door, leave. Don't follow, because the forest is hungry, and it's already wearing my face. If you've made it this far, you know the truth. Daniel Carter never walked out of those woods. The Rockies took him, just like Robinson, just like Evans, and maybe even Lisa. The towers don't guard against fire anymore. They guard against something far worse. And if you think this was just a story, if you think this was just fiction, then tell me, why is Tower 1 still listed on the ranger maps, decades after it was supposed to be abandoned? Maybe you'll climb that ladder one day. Maybe you'll hear your own voice calling back from the static. If you're brave enough to face the forest again, subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone you'd never dare bring here in person. And let me know in the comments. Would you stay in Tower 1 if it meant finding out what's really hiding in the Rockies? Until next time, keep your light close and keep your radio off.